Compliance is very broad. You do not need to be a legal practitioner or a lawyer to be a compliance professional. You have a lot to read without necessarily finding it concise. Being a part of professional organizations, professional bodies, or having your colleagues at your beck and call will help you. Don't get lost in the learning bubble. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 7 of How I Broke Into Compliance. Thank you for sticking along. Thank you for following the story from how I started from utter confusion to the point where I am leading the compliance team of one of Nigeria's fastest growing virtual asset service provider. Today's episode is going to be pretty fast, straight to the point. I will be speaking about doing the things I learned doing the work. 5 things I learned doing the work. And I will be speaking from an industry perspective. Alright, so fasten your seatbelt. It's about to go down. So here are 5 things that I learned when I began to practice as a compliance professional, particularly from regulatory compliance industry in financial sector. The first thing I realized when I began to practice fully as a compliance professional is the fact that compliance is very broad. One of the first things you may need to do is to identify the niche, the compliance niche you want to focus in or you want to focus on. Right? We've got compliance in the financial sector, we've got compliance in insurance, we've got compliance in the energy sector, we've got compliance in oil and gas. Recently, I was speaking to a professional, I was speaking to someone who says that she's focusing on ESG, that's environmental sustainability and governance, right, as an aspect of compliance. And so you can also find compliance in for non-profit business or non-profit organizations. So compliance is very broad and you will have to find your niche within the compliance space very quickly and early enough. The second thing I learned when I began to practice is that you actually do not need to be a lawyer to be a compliance professional. Although I must preface this by saying that being a legal practitioner or being a lawyer gives you an advantage, all right, because it becomes easier for you. However, if you are not a legal professional, you can still practice as a compliance professional. You can still do compliance, you can still practice as a compliance professional. Why? Because you can self-study, you can self-teach or self-learn and earn certificates. So it's not unusual to find a lot of people who are not lawyers, who are not even in social sciences, practicing as compliance professional. If you can read, if you can interpret, if you're able to analyze things and communicate, you're able to break things down for the management team and stakeholders, then you are good to go even if you didn't have a legal background. The third thing I learned as I began to practice as a compliance professional is that you have to study wide. When I resumed in my workplace, I was lost, literally, right? Because I had to, grasp several laws. There are a lot of policies. Take these for instance. Between January 2026 and June 2026, the Central Bank of Nigeria has released more than 10 policies for the financial sector. Whether you be an IMTO or you be a PSP or you be a BSP or you are a commercial bank or a microfinance bank, you've had to domesticate those regulations to the organizations you work with in the several subsets within the financial sector. So think about this as just CBN alone. Now we have the SEC and we have other subsets. There are international regulations that you need to study on. So there's a lot to study, and then there are no concise guides. So you have to study wide right? And at the same time, begin to consolidate when you do the fourth thing I'm about to tell you. The fourth lesson I learned is that you cannot do without being a part of, a professional body. Okay, so it's a general thing that professional bodies are great, but it is even more important for a compliance professional because, like I said, there is a lot to read, and if you're just starting, you can get lost and you can focus on things that are not necessary or essential. But with a professional organization or association or friends and accountability partners, you are able to consolidate, you are able to, tailor your lessons and your learning, and you're able to focus on the most important things for now so that you don't go reading, obsolete laws and directives that have been overtaken or that have been repealed. Besides that, it also helps you expand your own learning, your paradigm. Learning from your colleagues is a beautiful thing. I remember one incident where I was in Abuja at the NFIU office. We were sitting in the room, and I had these amazing guys from different organizations leading who have been practicing before I came on board, and they were speaking, they were literally speaking over my head. I said it when I came back to the office. I said, I've never been in a room in my life where for like 3, 4, 5 hours, people were speaking and I could not say anything because I realized that I had a lot to learn. So I kept quiet for over 5 hours, right? Because I stepped into a room where people who knew their stuff were really speaking, and I knew I needed to learn. And there was no shame in that whatsoever. I took up the challenge, and it even helped me begin to think about the next level or the next phase of my career as a compliance professional. Like they would always say that it is not what you know that matters, but it is who you know sometimes that makes the big difference. They would also say concerning lawyers that a good lawyer is not one who knows all the law, but one who knows where to find the law. And you know what? Information is an asset for a compliance professional. And the easiest place to find information, correct information, concise information, tailored information are when you are with other peers. The fifth and the final lesson I learned is don't be trapped in the learning phase. You can never learn enough. And no learning, no reading, no watching of videos, tutorial certification can replace the practice, what you find in practice. The typologies and the judgment you need to make when practicing is a different ball game entirely. So don't deceive yourself by continually learning. You need to quickly apply quickly apply the things you're learning by volunteering or getting yourself hooked up to an organization, interning, offering yourself for projects, practicing real life scenarios. There is a big difference between what you learn on paper and what you do. The judgment you need to make when the judgment you need to make when it's a real life situation and the stakes are higher, right, is totally different from what you would see when you're just learning. You can never learn enough, and sometimes even the basics is enough for you to start with. The basics is enough for you to start with. So don't get trapped in the learning bubble. Don't get trapped in the learning bubble. Make sure that you apply as you are learning. So what are the 5 things I have spoken about in no particular order? Is that compliance is very broad, and you may need to niche down in compliance particularly. Number 2, that you do not need to be a legal practitioner or a lawyer to be a compliance professional. Number 3, that you have a lot to read without necessarily finding it concise. So number 4 now solves the problem, because being a part of professional organization, professional bodies, or having your colleagues at your beck and call will help you. So do not miss being part of the industry and experiencing the industry at large. And number 5, don't get lost in the learning bubble. Once you learn, apply them, because what you learn in practice is different. What you see in practice is a different ball game from what you have when you're learning. Thank you for joining and following this episode so far. This is the end of episode 7. I believe that you've learned something. If you have learned anything, drop a comment for me in the comment section. Also, please, it helps us when you like, when you comment, and when you also share this with other people. It tells the algorithm that there is value in this thing. Thank you for listening. I am Ajama Luashon. See you next time. Bye for now.